2020 was the year of nothing but negative business stories. But is that an accurate depiction of all that really happened in 2020? What's up and welcome to the Fervent 4. Did you know that only 4% of businesses ever cross the annual $1 million revenue mark? Hello, I'm Zack Miller, author of Anomaly. With me today, I have my co-host Tim Ryan, lead man at StartWheel.org. Thank you so much for joining us. The Fervent 4 is a weekly show each and every single Thursday at 11 a.m. dedicated to sharing insights into growing a world-class business no matter the climate. Brandon Johnson actually opened a business or acquired a business in the last 18 months. Shocker, right? Headlines can be misleading AF unless you get on the ground level of the business world and take a peek at what is actually happening. So we're going to talk to him about that. But before we get into this, I have to think about like my favorite wine piece of content of all time. And it was maybe, honestly, not a Zach stat here, true statement, was When Grape Lady Falls. You've seen it, right?
No.
Brandon, you've never seen Grape Lady Falls?
Yeah, no, I have. I'm sorry. I thought you were asking Tim. Yep.
No. I mean, it's like the greatest piece of content ever. And I saw that. I remember the first time I ever saw it. It was this guy I went to school with, Steve Butera. He posted it on Facebook when Facebook was super rad and cool and people were like excited and all positive about it. And he posted it. And I laughed for a good 15 minutes when I saw that. If you guys have never watched it, we'll get a link of the clip here in a second. We'll post the link up there. But watch Grape Lady Falls. It's great. Is that what got you into the wine world? Is like you saw her stomping on the grapes and you were like, I gotta get into that?
No, what's funny though is in the production space, we actually still have like a framed photo of like I Love Lucy in the back there. So it's inspiration to kind of keep the fun in the environment there.
I mean, Grape Lady Falls, I Love Lucy. I mean, pretty similar stuff there. I mean, both monumental pieces of content viewed by millions of people over the years.
For sure.
You didn't expect me to do that one, Tim, did you?
No.
I'm all about the openings being crazy as Gavin has now watched it because he hadn't watched it before. It sounds like, but Tim, what do you got?
I don't know, man. You stumped me on this one. I guess the question I have for Brandon would be the fact that, do you have an opportunity for customers to go in and stomp grapes? I don't know.
We do not. COVID aside, and all of the things that we have to keep in line for production that we have and having people in and out of the winery. But we're a very small space. I'd say much more akin to what I would describe a micro winery or an urban winery than a large vineyard or a large production space. So it's pretty tight there. If we were doing that, we'd probably be like out in our parking lot, stomping grapes in buckets and not necessarily out in a really good kind of nice outdoor setting.
I guess that happened at like a Renaissance fair or something like that. Like it can't be like a normal, like practical way to do something like that. But I don't know why that came up while I was thinking that. I just did like literally 30 seconds before. I was like, I gotta talk about this. This is gonna be great. But well, hey, look, that's a new business idea. You could pivot and just do stomping if you wanted to, if things ever change. Okay, so you at some point in 2020 decided that, hey, like I'm not just a customer of this current place. I could potentially acquire it. How does and I should have asked you this before. Like, how do I pronounce the whole business name?
Yeah, so it's Vintner's Cellar Winery. It's in Yorktown, so it's just of Yorktown. Vintner Cellar.
Right
Winery,
next to
Yorktown.
County Grill.
Right next to County Grill in Yorktown, Virginia. Just on kind of the line of Newport News and Yorktown. I guess really the kind of backstory is, right, like I work in the hospitality industry, in the hotel industry. It was a really kind of unstable time last year. And as we were looking at some options of kind of what the future looked like, we're just kind of open to opportunities. Went to an actual outdoor wine tasting, wine party last summer. And we're talking with the owner of the business who we'd known for 4 or 5 years. And she was talking about closing the business. She had a really hard time making the pivot, going digital, getting set up with online orders, and really the parts of the business that she had loved for 14 years at that point just weren't there. And so I kind of started with a casual discussion of her deciding that she might not be sticking in business, and originally I just reached out to help and say, hey, I think, there's some really good kind of small business marketing companies in the area. Here's some contacts for you, some people that maybe you can reach out to. Was just trying to help. And kind of the conversation was, this is all great. This is fantastic, but I don't want to do any of this. Like, I'm 65 years old. I've been in, business for 15 years. This is already my retirement job. Like, I think it's time to move on to the next phase of life. And that was kind of it. It was unexpected. This would have been last July at this point, and it kind of started a series of conversations heading into the fall that ultimately culminated in us taking over the business in December of this past year.
Interesting. So it was any of the business before any e-commerce whatsoever?
No. I mean, the business essentially was tastings at the winery, retail sales, and then a big portion of the revenue is at festivals.
How big is the e-commerce wine world now? I mean, is it still, because at some point, like I remember, Tim, I might even pitch this idea to you. Like, I had this idea to do like beers in different cities where like a beer of the month, when the craft beer scene started coming up, I had just gotten back from like Boulder, Colorado or something. I was like, oh, it'd be interesting before there was like super distribution in different places. It would be interesting if I could somehow send someone a 6-pack of beer from Boulder, Colorado, like a grab bag of 6-packs to different people, and they paid some sort of club fee for that. The problem was commerce from state to state, at least at the time, was not possible. So is that something that's kind of easier to get through now, or how does the e-commerce world work with you and shipping and stuff like that at this point?
Yeah,
because it seems like it's something that you're either going to want to do or get into. It sounds like.
Yeah. So I look at it from two different perspectives. Right now, we're small enough on the production side that we're not shipping out of state. We can ship within Virginia. The challenge, to your point, that most beverage businesses have is that every state individually regulates alcohol sales in a different way, with different reporting requirements, different delivery requirements. So it really puts the onus on a business to be able to track that, or to use a third party that can help facilitate that. And there's a couple of industry, leaders that help make that happen on the paperwork side, but also on the shipping and storing side of the business. And for us right now, it's something that we might work towards. We're not producing at the scale that it makes sense for us to do like a national shipping distribution.
Apparently there's a company in Northern Virginia that has a wine club, by the way. And I don't remember how much it costs, maybe $50-$75 a month. And they have something. I remember Paul Singh, I saw him post about this, who, Tim, you probably remember from Start Norfolk 3. He lives up there, or at least he used to. And he said that he had joined this club. This is just some inspiration for you, Brandon. He joined this club, and I guess he gets to go pick up like a bottle or two at the actual facility once a month, something like that. They have 450,000 clients or something like that.
Yeah, I'd say that I think the average winery does something around 35 to 40% of their business through wine club sales, right? Through like really activating those true fans.
Unreal to think those numbers. Even if the number was 45,000 and I added a zero, that number is still ridiculous.
It is. Yeah. I mean, in our region, you think about tourism, I think the majority of wine sales still happen at the local purchase point. I'd say
like a Total Wine type of thing.
Yeah. Like a Total Wine, or like a local shop, or at places that you're going to. E-commerce is still such a small part. And a part of that is that it's a lot of legacy companies that make up the wine industry that are really, a lot of them are actually commercially producing under private labels for wine brands that are emerging. So to be able to go out and ship direct, you've got your kind of big name brands, but they're fulfilling different parts of the distribution channel under private labels that you don't necessarily know that they're doing.
Okay, so look at this stat. Wine e-commerce sales grew from about 600 million in 19 to close to 2 billion. So that's like a 3x, basically, more than 3x in 1 year. That means U.S. online sales now represent about 3% of the U.S. wine market, up from 1%.
Wow.
In 1 year alone. I mean, obviously, I think we know how that happened, but I mean that's I would be interested in what the context is on the reverse side of that. Maybe because I guess wine sales in person probably would have dropped, but there's money.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very well.
Brandon, so your handle is the hospitality dude. Before you made the purchase and you were just a customer, was your head just swirling with this idea and this idea, and if we had this, we would implement this, that, and the other thing? Is that what led to the ultimate decision to say, hey, let's try to make this purchase? And then if so, what types of things have you implemented once the purchase went through?
Yeah, so I mean, first and foremost, they make our favorite wines. Like we just were really like avid customers in that kind of core group of people that really enjoy the actual product. So I think for me that was really important. Experience aside in the hospitality industry, I think that really looking at the product side of it was really important to us. So that we could be passionate about what we have. It's such a small operation that I think really the first question was kind of like, how are they pulling this off out of this like 3,000 square feet space? And, what kind of business is it really? Is this a hobby or is it a business? And as we dove in and really, discovered that it had been a profitable business for a really long time with a really good, stable group of clients, then it became, okay, what can we bring to the table, right? So we've opened up a new website with ordering, be able to take online sales, pre-sales, whether we're doing shipping, traditional e-commerce channels and opening those up, whether it's Facebook ads or on Instagram. But also, some really kind of traditional biz dev strategies. We've got corporate customers that we do custom labels for, and, whether they're doing corporate gifting for wine or for employees. The real estate market is one example where we've got, a really good book of clients that come on a regular basis and they're giving wine, if they're closing houses or closing loans, selling, luxury cars, and opening up some of those channels to be able to increase the sales and really kind of just make sure the product got in more hands.
You acquired that aspect of it, or you implemented that?
We implemented that aspect of it. Yeah, we had a couple, and really, there hadn't really been an active outbound effort. I think really kind of the strategy before was to produce at a level that they had enough to really work through festivals, which is a big revenue channel for the kind of business that we are and the size of business that we are. Still the case now. I think that we can go into a festival environment and sell 50 or 100 cases in a day versus online sales that are a few bottles at a time coming through the website day after day, where we get that consistent base.
So like the Norfolk Town Point Park Wine Fest, you would sell 50 cases, 100 cases.
I was going to say, Zach and I have been known to do some damage.
But not buy cases. Man, so when you were looking at the books, when you were looking at the business, like I think there's some standard stuff that people would look at, but like what type of stuff specifically were you looking at to figure out that point hobby versus an actual profitable business? I mean, was it black and white that you could see from the numbers, or were there other things that you were looking at?
Well, we did we did a review of the financials with the Small Business Development Center, which is, I'll shout them out, and just always an advocate for the programs they have available, especially because a lot of them are free. So I kind of took the financials from a couple years to them and said, as an outside set of eyes, do you guys see any red flags? And over the course of a couple of virtual meetings, because we couldn't meet in person, didn't identify any major red flags, identified some areas that we needed to ask some additional questions and do some due diligence, understand, what falls under this bucket, here in the financials, what falls under that bucket. Just to really understand kind of the day-to-day, right? Small business, especially, they're so integrated into people's lives. It could be as simple as something as, how many cell phone lines are on the phone plan that it belongs to the winery, and who do those belong to? We went through and really decided that it just was a solid, small business. It had been decidedly small, and had some upside opportunity.
Intentionally small because that's what they wanted. They didn't want to have a big scaled business. Got it.
Yeah, and this was actually their retirement job. Like the couple that started the winery, they had already retired from careers, and this was kind of like their later in life passion project. And it was one that lasted. To even be at a point where you have a business that's 14 years old, right? Like there's good bones there, even if there are some things that can be improved upon.
Well, and I think the context of some of those pieces are important, right? Where it's like someone asks you the question, for example, how much money do you have in your bank account? Oh, today, $1 million. Knowing that a $1.1 million charge is going tomorrow, like the context of that story or that statement isn't all there, right? And so to be like, what's in this bucket,
Right.
I think that's interesting when you're looking at, because financials, they only show so much if you only look so deep. And so if you don't look deep enough, it can really screw you up in that situation. So that's cool that you
Well,
You
yeah, and
did
yeah,
dove into that.
I'd never bought a business before, like I'm a guy, I work in sales and marketing. Like I'm a, sales marketing biz dev guy in the hospitality industry and the hotel industry. So it was a lot of like, I didn't know what I didn't know. And, I just really reached out to as many people as I could, asked a lot of questions. Like I said, got those eyes on it from some professionals that could say, hey, look, we've been through this. Um, and then going through that process, speaking to other local business leaders, their perception of the business, the county administrators and tax people, and really kind of just going through and saying, not just does the business exist, but what's people's perception of it? Is it positive? Are we going to have to overcome that, right? And that led to conversations about whether or not we would need to rebrand, and things like that. So it opened up a lot of questions kind of in our 5-year growth plan that we'll still be kind of working on addressing.
You talked about the acquisition of the business, and you talked about kind of like the county aspect of it and stuff like that. One number that a lot of people will throw around is traffic that drives by, because you guys are a retail environment. Did you actually put some proof into putting into those numbers to see if 50,000? Because right, so like you helped open the main. My office was down across the street from there. I think the number was something like there's 50,000 people active in downtown Norfolk a week. I call BS on that number, right? Because I look at that number and I say that means 50,000 people are going to be walking into potential, that's the word there, right? Could be walking into the restaurants and buying. And all you have to do is go into those restaurants to realize that they're turning one a day, maybe, meaning the cycle through, you're not waiting in a long line. That's not really that crazy busy compared to other places. So did you look at that number that they gave you and then actually tie deeper into it to figure out like, okay, like this traffic's nice, but it's not really going to be realistic for the things that I want to do. I'm going to have to really do some outbound stuff to acquire the business, because I find that number is a pretty misleading number in most cases.
Yeah, so I mean, we had the data for that, but I think what's more important is less how many people are driving past and how many people, are potential customers. And I don't think those are the same thing, right? I think it's a vanity metric, right? It's
100%. I think I 100% think it's a vanity metric. I mean, that's
it's maybe the original vanity metric, right, for all of us in that.
Economic Development 101. How many people potentially could drive by your thing a day?
Right.
Oh.
Right. I actually looked at it and said, it was much more about who the other people in the development were and understanding some of the other businesses. If they had a loyal customer base, like we're right next to a really popular, barbecue restaurant, and that's more helpful to us than the people that drive past. I drive past the winery 4 times a day just to be able to get from my neighborhood to, my day job and a couple other areas that we go. And so I can physically see it, to and from what the other development or what the other people in the development are doing on a day-to-day basis for cars that are actually at their business.
Interesting. When you took over the business, was there a lot of data that you could look at, or did you have to operate everything for a certain amount of time just to establish a baseline?
Yeah, so we have a really good relationship with the previous owner of the business. I can pick up the phone and call her anytime, and that's something that I'm really happy about, right? I think that there's some risk associated with having them too close to a business person being too close after you've made the sale, especially as you're changing things. But there wasn't a ton of data. I mean, it's a traditional small business, and I think that in the context of small family-run businesses, that weren't necessarily digitally native or affluent, there was a lot that we had to kind of create from a CRM standpoint, from a POS system, updating it, maximizing all of the tools that we already had.
Yeah, I mean, I would think that just even going back to the basics in terms of, hey, this is the products that we have, this is the most popular selling. You had mentioned just a few minutes ago that you love the product. So, which ones do you produce more of? Which ones do you cut? What there's a lot of stuff to digest. How long did it take you to figure all that out so that you can start moving forward?
I mean, in some ways, we're still figuring it out.
Sure,
I think we had pretty clear data on sales to be able to look backwards and say, okay, so a little bit of context, right? Like we're a micro winery, we're a storefront winery, we're not on a large vineyard. we specialize in fruit fusion wines that are sweet. So we get leeway to play around with wine in a way that a lot of traditional wine companies don't. So whereas a traditional winery may have 5, 6, or 7 varietals, we have recipes to make upwards of 40 wines just when we walked in the door, right? And so with that, we've got really some cool opportunities to play with some different things. And so as we look backwards, we said, okay, like here's our 10 core wines. We're going to make sure that as we ramp up production and work through the inventory that we took on when we took over the business, that we'd make sure that we had those 10 wines, that we'd make sure that we were able to be consistent in the delivery and the quality of those. And then really this summer, kind of in the 6 to 7 month in, is when we started to branch out into some of those others that maybe are seasonal. I'll have product coming in tomorrow to make a new wine varietal that's going to be coming out around Thanksgiving this year that we haven't had in a year. So long-term customers, when that comes out, we'll be able to reactivate them to let them know that, we've brought this back.
What's just out of curiosity, what are your top 3 sellers?
Top 3 sellers for us: Bear Paw, which is a black raspberry and blueberry Merlot; Simply White, which is a white cranberry Pinot Grigio; and then right now it kind of shifts by season. So we do peach apricot Sauvignon Blanc, which is called Summer Fling, and we'll be winding that down and kind of selling out of that over the next couple weeks.
Interesting. So from so you talked about other things in the retail shop, had conversations with them, stuff like that. I'm interested in like what kind of conversations you would have with them, and then also things across the street. So they're one of the most popular veterinarian places in I think the region is right there. Tim, one of my dogs has had surgery there, very expensive. Were there conversations with people like that? Because like how do you make that the parallels there so that this could be a good thing for my business or not? What kind of conversations are you having so that you can figure out like, okay, like I think this is this. What do I need to do to get, what kind of questions and answers do I need to get out of them to actually validate that what I think is this or something like that?
Yeah, I think I really just approach it as kind of a relationship building mindset in general, right? Like if we're going to be neighbors, I want to be neighbors and not people that are just next to each other. But in our development, we've got 2 restaurants. We've got a bakery that specializes in pastries. We've got a cigar store, not a shop or a place that you can smoke. We've got a couple of other businesses that are bringing in regular foot traffic, like a pharmacy, which is probably not the best fit for the winery, but tax places. And after you're filing your taxes, you might feel like you need a glass of wine. And so it's really just making sure that we can kind of refer people back and forth. We've talked about doing some events together. We've worked with the bakery to do some pairings for some of our wine tastings. We're in discussions right now with the cigar store about doing kind of an outdoor wine and cigar pairing where you can come in and get a flight and pick from a couple of different cigars that we can kind of partner on and really activate space and close some of those loops, right? Share some client bases, uncover some new clients. As far as the awesome veterinary clinic there, I've also had to have my dog there, and they've done some amazing work for an emergency that we had with our family. But I think in the context of just the larger neighborhood, right, we have some opportunities to market within neighborhoods. There are some, very well-run HOAs in York County that we're going to be able to do some advertising in some of their newsletters and things. Tim's neighborhood will probably be seeing one of those advertisements here coming in another month or 2.
I'm sure if there was an advertisement on his running outfits, he would be willing to pony up his body for that.
I am the local legend throughout the neighborhood.
The running man on Running Man.
That's right.
Yes. Yeah. So that's really it. It's not necessarily about it's much more about just making sure we have those relationships and figuring out whether or not there's some synergies. There's not going to be a match for everybody, and that's okay. But that doesn't mean that a business that has nothing to do with ours doesn't have people there that would be interested in our product or vice versa.
Interesting. So are you guys going to be at the Town Point Wine Fest?
Yep. So we're going to do 6 festivals in 5 weeks in October and November.
Okay, so I'd like to dig deeper onto like festivals and stuff like that. How much does it cost to be a winery there?
Usually it's a few $100s to register and get a 10 by 10 tent, and then
a few hundred, like 200 or like 800.
Depends on the festival.
Okay, so like that festival specifically, and the
Yes.
reason I apparently to be a food vendor there, it's like $2,500 a day or something like that.
So I think it depends on the kind of event, right? And I
Uh-huh.
would say that Norfolk specifically for us as a winery is a few hundred. It's not 800. I'd say
Okay.
it's probably 300 or 400, but it is a wine festival, right? And so it's meant to be, especially in Norfolk, who really have been champions of the education piece of their festivals, whether that's the beer festival or the wine festival, and have really put a lot of time into making sure that it's got some of the opportunities for you to really sample and learn and not just like get wasted. There's that, right? But I think that there's other kinds of events that we would be a part of that may be a food festival that they need a winery. There's beer festivals that they may want to have an alternative to beer, and we could go into there. And it's going to be different pricing for us in a beer festival than the breweries, just like it would be different pricing for a food vendor at a wine festival or at a beer
Got
festival.
it. So how do you then, from a business perspective, look at the list of events from a cost perspective, from an education perspective, from a clientele perspective, say, okay, this is exactly what we're looking for. Like, how do you come to that conclusion instead of it just being, everyone gets housed, which also happens at Winefest from 4 to 6 p.m. on any Winefest night. If you want to see some people get housed, that's the place to be in downtown Norfolk. I got plenty of videos to show, none of myself. But like, how do you come to that decision? Because I think a lot of people want to be at events. A lot of people want to sponsor events. A lot of people want to be in the community, but to actually figure out if this thing, as a guy who used to sell that to a lot of people too, like, how do you know that this thing is going to be a good bang for our buck? Like, what are the
Yeah.
things that you're looking for in that situation?
Yeah. And so for us, it's a couple of different ways to look at data. We have historical data from wine festivals that we've participated in the past, or from one-off events that we've participated in the past. So we can go backwards and look at sales that way, right? So we can say, we went to this festival in 2017 and 2018. We met a lot of people, but didn't make a lot of sales. But ultimately, we made some new connections. So maybe there's a different value there. And others, we're looking at it in the context of how many of our competitors are going to be there and what kind of wines they're having, right? One of the challenges that festivals are having right now is that because so many places are short staffed, a lot of larger wineries aren't able to participate in festivals in the way that they could in the past because they're going to be busy harvesting grapes. And so we're looking at that. We're looking at data that the shows themselves will have ticket sales, and they'll have some data, not usually sales data, but some kind of allegories, to be able to speak to the successes they've had. And the other piece of it is, if it's one that we haven't tried and that we don't have a lot of information on, we just really have to do our best risk assessment of the time value of a particular festival, of a particular event, and give it a shot. I'll give you an example. This past Thursday, we did with the Virginia Living Museum, we did the Dino Wine Down, and so they did a museum mixers event, and we were the sole winery for a 300 ticket event. And it was a risk for us. It was a risk for them, but I think in the context of what we felt like we needed to be successful, that it was a success. And it also opened the door for 300 people, a lot of which were not familiar with, our business, that we were able to then work on reactivating. So we brought some QR codes for people to subscribe to our emails, and some, ways they could get discounts for their wine orders, and try to really just make sure that we maximize the opportunity when we're in front of people.
Interesting. So on the festival track, do you go outside of Hampton Roads? Do you go to Charlottesville at those types of festivals? And is that
Yeah.
interesting?
So we do like this year in April, we did the Shenandoah Apple Blossom Festival, which is like a week-long festival of all kinds of events, and they had a 2-day wine event. We were one of what was originally going to be 25 wineries, and ended up being 12 because of staffing issues. And I mean, absolutely crushed it. Like we were very afraid we were going to run out of wine, and we had very much over prepared based on previous year's sales. And so for us, it's almost it's a bigger value proposition to hit the right shows out of town, because people will make more purchases because they can't just drive to the winery and pick up more wine, right? When we do Yorktown in October, when we do New Kent, when we do Powhatan, rest of Richmond, we'll do Norfolk. Of those festivals, those people are all within a pretty good proximity, right? So they may buy a bottle of wine at the festival, they may not, because they know that they can come by, in their own time. Out of town, that's not as much of an option, even if we do some shipping, because the cost, goes up to be able to do that.
So
Okay.
people that are out of town, if they love your wine, they can fill out some sort of form and it's like, hey, ship me a case of this, and then
Yep.
you guys accommodate that.
Yeah, we can do that. I mean, but even at the winery, when people come for tastings from out of town, I mean, we see that, we drive more sales that way. And again, it's the same thing. It's the opportunity there at that moment to bring something back with them to North Carolina or DC or whatever. We get a lot of people that come to the historic triangle that'll come by the winery and kind of make plans while they're in town. And so for those, if the further away they are, the more likely they are to buy in a larger volume, right? And so for that, we're purposefully, positioning volume buys and promotions to be able to take advantage of that.
A case is 12 or 16?
12.
What does a case typically cost to ship?
I
mean, I realize that's a ridiculous question. Like, if I was in Northern Virginia and I wanted a case of something, what is that going to cost me?
Yeah, if we just do ground shipping, it could be $20 to $30. A lot of wineries, depending on volume, will absorb that cost, and that's kind of the standard for doing business. We didn't ship for a large portion of this year. We have the licenses, and we really are not promoting it on a wide level.
Is that just a simple ABC off, or is it?
There's a couple of things behind it, yeah, but it's really through UPS and through FedEx. They have specific wine shipping programs, right? The average person can't mail a bottle of wine in the mail. If you're an average person out there, please don't mail a bottle of wine. They'll take it and they won't get it. But they follow the processes. They understand the state to state, right, commerce and things that need to happen and the transport rules around that.
When you acquired the business, did you have to get a new ABC? Did you have to go through the whole new ABC process, or could you stick and be grandfathered into what it was before?
So we did a stock buyout for that very reason. Instead of doing an asset buy the business where we'd have to start back over with those things, we, with some protections in the way that we bought the business, decided to do a stock buyout so that the business itself could keep the licenses that were already in place. So the licenses belong to the business, not to me personally.
And I think I told you this before, Tim, because I learned this with Carrie Norfolk when they were doing ABC offs. So if a business didn't have an ABC off, and that probably changed last year with COVID, allowing a lot of different things, but like we would go to these restaurants and they'd be like, look, we're really interested. We don't have an ABC off and we're not going to get one because we don't want to, we are grandfathered into all this other stuff and we don't want to have to come up to a new regulation of whatever that is if we get this new thing. And so some of the stuff was dramatically different. And so that was a good idea then, I guess, from the stock buyout to keep that, because you would have had to have gotten to 2020 term instead of whatever it was probably in 17 years ago, whatever that was. I don't want to do 2004.
I mean, it really, if we did it the other way, essentially the previous owner would have had to keep a version of the business open for a few months to be able to do the transition, right? So we also would have then had to have some kind of a discussion about the time value of them maintaining that corporation to be able to get us to the point where we had it, right? Or we would have had to close the business for 3 months. And so it just made a lot of sense for us. And, there's some risks associated with, stock buyout versus an asset buyout. But, I think that we just structured it in a way that made sense for us, that kind of hedged the risk on both sides and moved forward.
Did that come to the advice from your attorney to help you with this?
We talked about it. I'm not sure. I think we definitely was leaning more towards an asset buyout, but we found a way to make it work. Right. Once I explained kind of the time cost and the real dollar cost associated with starting over. So really, we put some protections in place to be able to make sure that if there were any liabilities that came up, from before we took over, that those would be the responsibility of the previous owners, and that going forward, we had a clean slate for the business.
Oh, staffing. You mentioned that a couple of times. Like, what's going on with the staffing world right now? Like, it seems like in your mind, hospitality is one thing we've heard. I've heard that like floors of hotels are closing because they can't staff. Like, is this stuff real true? Like what is actually going on in the world of staffing, and like, how do we fix it? Like, just your general thoughts, I guess, on like the 2020 staffing conundrum of the world.
Yeah, well, I think it's a couple things. Yes, staffing is that big of an issue, right? So my day job is I'm the director in sales and marketing for a full service hotel.
Was it always an issue though?
So it's been a challenge, I think, and I think that for the jobs that we have, right, they're hard jobs. Hospitality in general and dealing with the public in different capacities is tough. It's way worse post-COVID or intra-COVID than it was pre-COVID. And there's a couple of reasons for that. I think, for me personally, my personal opinion is it's a combination of the fact that a lot of people lost their job security through layoffs and, are not willing to go back to feeling insecure in jobs that are in our industry until we feel like we're past it. I think that there's a more competitive wage market right now, just in general, as people are making adjustments to the tight market. And I think ultimately the other piece of it is I just think as an industry, we haven't painted a really good picture for people out in the world. Like if you're considering a job in a hotel or a restaurant or a bar right now, and all you see out on everywhere is just like doom and gloom and like we're understaffed and please be so nice because we're all being like abused and shouted at, which is not necessarily the case. Like I think that it's not necessarily like we're not telling the good parts of what it means to be a part of our business, right? Which are that this is one of the only businesses, hospitality, food and beverage, that you can really work your way from the bottom to the top, that you don't necessarily have to have degrees, right, to be successful. And I think that as we get back to that conversation and away from like feel bad for us, we don't have any staff, right? Nobody wants to be the first one into a place that like is understaffed because you're just like signing up to be like to actually absolutely grind, right? I mean, like it's not the same thing as saying like this is an awesome place to work and you should be beating down our door to come work here. And I think that we'll get back to that. I think that a lot of people, especially through interviews and things, have painted that doom and gloom, and I think it's good for people to understand the realities that we're dealing with, because it absolutely has been incredibly tough this year to keep hotels operationally, to keep restaurants operational, to keep wineries and bars operational. But we're not going to be recruiting people by continuing to like tell everyone how bad it is.
So I mean, I jokingly wrote the headline, the open to the show, to be like, hey, like not everything in the world is like the worst thing ever. I mean, it's almost like people be like, wow, you opened a business during the pandemic? That's not allowed. Like, there's no way that's ever possible. And it's just like, and we, even when Tim and I started this 73 or so shows ago, like we started because there was an opportunity to use COVID to our advantage. And honestly, and we said this a few weeks ago, most of the conversations have zero to do with COVID. Right. And so it's interesting that people have leached on so much to that. Not saying that it's not a bad thing, not saying anything like that. Please, people, don't take that out of context, right? But like the businesses like have figured that aspect out. And it's like it's almost like people like are salivating for the negativity, which is quite sickening if you really think about it, right? Like I want these businesses, I want to hear what we can be doing to make things better, not just hearing, oh my gosh, there's no jobs available, but not even ask the question like, well, what is happening in that situation? Not once in any of those, higher up level of people who are leading our community, you can take that however you want, has someone said, this is the reason why, right? Probably because they don't go to the ground level of a business and figure out what's actually happening. They just think, oh, I went to a restaurant, I stayed at a hotel, and it was the worst experience ever because I had to wait 23 minutes for my bucket of ice. How dare that happen? And to me, it's like you can't fix a problem if you don't know what the problem is. So I appreciate that you articulated that. And it's just like, guys, like most of the time you go to a restaurant, like I would hope that you're not going to be a Karen to the people, or Kevin, because we need to get Kevins in there too. But like, it's kind of like what you said, like people are getting yelled at. It's like, yo, like, why are you that person yelling at that person? Like, that's a deeper thing in itself. Like,
well, right.
Okay, calm down.
And a lot of line level jobs, right? I think in our industry specifically, but across industries, like they're jobs, they're not necessarily careers. And I think that it's, incumbent on the leaders in our businesses and our business community to help paint a pathway for people that they can turn their job into a career path, or that they can use that job to get to where they're trying to go. And I think that that's one of the advantages of hospitality, and it's just not being told right now, right? Like, I think the other piece of it is that, like, some of these jobs suck, man. Like, they're not a good time. And I think that, there are jobs that have been thankless, that have been underpaid, that people have just had enough of. And I think that, for all of the pushback and positioning of it, like, I think when you actually talk to people who have maybe either been through layoffs or made a career change, like, they're not exactly missing what they used to have, right? Like the transition away from when they had no choice and their jobs were taken from them or they disappeared overnight. Like they found other things and they're finding a different world and a different avenue to get to where they're trying to go.
Yeah, and if you take at least the guests on our show, a majority of the guests that we've had, either on air or off air, have said that they're doing really, really well. So well to the point where they feel bad and they don't even want to mention it on air because
but don't you think that's the doom and gloom aspect of it? Of we're not telling the full context of a story?
Yeah, I mean, well, I think that, to Brandon's point, in the sense of, I think that right now, it's the easy thing is to say doom and gloom, but what we really need now is leadership. We need leaders to help lead us out of this. And hey, rather than talk about we need staffing or we need this, that, we need to fix things, but it's how we're doing this. What are we putting in place to correct it? And so I appreciate you, Brandon, in the sense of you showing the leadership in the sense of let's do it. Let's make this happen.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like you look at downturns in general, right? Like how many unicorn companies are out there that came about in 2008 and 2009? Like opportunity comes when it comes. Like I didn't go into the year last year planning to buy a business. To be honest, like I was going into last year really planning to just like crush it at work and really like take the next steps with the team that I've been leading and really like come into our own as a business and in the business that I work for, not the business that I own. And I think that you don't really get to control, when opportunities come. So I think that just kind of being prepared and having some groundwork done, if whether it's, owning a business or having a different job, like, I think you have to take the personal accountability to have the groundwork done so that if the timing works, then it works. And if it doesn't, what does it really cost you? We spent a lot of time last year, like working for free at the winery to be able to understand how it actually worked. And that was, time that was invested in learning. And I think that, could we have gone about it a different way and been like, oh, how much time are we going to put into it?
I think that's going to come back and benefit you tenfold in the future because you know so much now that when things do pick up or whatever you want to call it, the timing is right. Timing is everything, but then you hit the product market fit because you've got the customer list, you got the data to support everything. Then all of a sudden, you're going into hyperdrive and then you're a slingshot forward where everyone else is just kind of stuck doom scrolling.
Yeah.
You seem to have, so I don't know you, right? So you look familiar. I said that earlier. I've talked to you now for an hour, let's say, right? You seem to have a pretty positive mindset. Is that something that's been instilled in you for forever? Do you just listen to a lot of like David Goggins quotes, like where maybe he's got to be positive in some capacity, right? Like how do you have that mindset to do that where the overwhelming majority of the people in your industry on the surface seem to not have that?
I would say I would consider myself more of a realist than, a person who's always positive, right? But I think that there's something to be said for not making things worse than they are. This year, particularly, last year, particularly, especially in my business, have been, two of the hardest that I've ever been through, that we've all ever been through. But I think that there's something to be said of having like survived that and being able to decide that we're going to work towards thriving, right? Like if we accept that where things are is where they're always going to be, then there's nothing to shoot for, right? So for me, I think it's much more, especially to Tim's point on the leadership side of, painting where we want to go and kind of who we want to be when we grow up and just, finding a way to make it there. It's not always going to be in the right timing. It's not always going to follow the blueprint, but I mean, what other option is there other than forward?
Yeah, I mean, you've felt the pain in terms of from the day job standpoint. Is you have to let staff go or whatever the case is because room occupancy isn't where it needs to be. I mean, you have that realistic picture, so you know firsthand what it's like.
Yeah, I mean, my hotel went from 128 employees to 18. It's easily the worst, week of my life. And I think having gone through that now to look at things as they are, that there are still a lot of lingering effects of, the changing world and what that looks like. But Things are a lot better now than they were then. Like the fact that we're arguing about not having enough staff instead of not having enough business is a privilege. And I think that it's just a matter of reframing, looking at those things from a different way.
What were the numbers again? Yeah.
128 to 18.
Okay. How many of those people did you personally have to let go? Roughly
9.
Okay, so of that 9, like, what's the like? How do you let someone go? Like, I think a lot of people will just say, "Oh, when someone's time to let them go, you let them go." Like, what do you do when you have to let someone go in a situation like a COVID, or in a situation of just anyone letting go? Because I feel like that emotion is something that, like, I've told this to Tim before. Like, people are just like, "Oh, you know what? The checklist says just fire the employee. Oh, the checklist just says hire the employee." I'm like, hold on a second. Like, I'm a human. This, like, I remember the first time I ever I probably never said this ever other than to you, Tim. Like, the first time I ever let someone go, I cried the night before because I was like, I cannot believe I'm about to do this.
Yeah. Anyone that says that business isn't personal has never been in business.
And so it was very difficult for me to do that. Like, I remember, I feel like it went better than I thought it was when I actually did it, but it was a very emotional thing. And people are like, "Oh, it's just a black and white decision." Sure, you can come to that decision, that it's black and white, that you have to do it. But then the emotional side of doing it, like, what was your strategy on how to get through something like that?
I mean, no strategy. And I hope to never do it again.
Access to a lot of wine.
Yeah, I just that's the truth. I wish I could say that there are tips and tricks, and if they're out there, I probably won't read them because I am going to do everything that I can to not have to go through that. Probably, likely that in my future career that it'll come about again. But I don't really want to get good at that, so I'm not going to focus on it.
What in terms of numbers now? Where is it rebounded back to?
Yeah, so I think we're at two contexts. Like from a wine business, I think that in a lot of ways, we're on track to be back towards 2019 levels, and we would have been there sooner had we had the digital footprint built out, the digital framework of our business. A lot of businesses are thriving. I've seen in the comments there, a couple of people are saying that, and the beverage business in general, numbers are up. Hotel business for us, we're back at a comfortable place where staffing is an issue, and we've been working through that. I think as we head into the fall, there's a little bit of uncertainty of things maybe slowing down a bit. Doesn't feel like we're going to be back under.
So with that, as things, I hear a lot of people talking about how it's been so slow to get back to where you're going, and a lot of that, it's not a matter of, hey, the doors are open, come on in, enjoy yourself. If you have to hire a whole new staff, or you have to find a whole new staff, onboard them, train them, get them to where they need to be, that takes a long time to bring all those people up to speed. And if, like, you look at the concerts industry right now, I mean, it's like a lot of the concerts, they're not even getting going until late August, September, October timeframe, just because it takes so long. Were you able to leverage previous employees, or did those previous employees say, I've moved on, and then you have to hire brand new people and start the whole process all over again?
Some of both. I think that's a good way to characterize it, right? That you've got some people that may be familiar, but you also have to keep in mind that the business that they're coming back to is not the business they left. So there's a retraining anyway, right? And the way things have changed, things have happened at such an accelerated speed, and so many decisions have been made on the fly, right? Over the last 18 months, I think in all of our businesses, that there's a retrain anyway. And then, I think that one of the challenges that you can have in a business, right, is that when someone comes back to a business that's not the same anymore, are they going to be engaged in the same way? Are they going to be invested in the same way? Do they even like the business anymore? If, things have fundamentally changed in the way that you operate, right? And I think that you just don't know that until you really have the discussion with individuals, right? Like the what could have been the favorite part of their job could be gone. And so you may think of the person being able to come back to the business, but it could be that, your business isn't a fit for them anymore. And I think that to our kind of earlier discussion about the industry and staffing, like, I think that the part that we're not talking about is that, there are parts and jobs in our industry that are not fulfilling the needs in a way that they used to, or in a way that people accepted as the best way in the past, right? Now that they've been forced to explore other options.
Don't get me wrong, the wine is very important. The wine is very important. However, the business you're in is the business of experiences, right? Whether the person walking in, we talked to Xerxes Nabong and Candace, I can't think of her last name, of Escape Room, Virginia, and those facilities, and we've talked to several others. Like, the experience is what matters, right? If you walk through the doors and you have an absolute, a D- experience, that person is going to never probably come back. If they get an A- to an A+, you're going to be a rock star and they're probably going to come back, right? And so that probably more has to do with the experience than the actual way that the wine tastes. Again, the wine is important, but the experience is that. What have you done to make sure that people feel welcome, that you guys do a bang up job on customer service, in kind of the realm of that, because it's so incredibly important that people feel welcome, that they feel like this was the greatest thing ever. And then living in a tourism area, I mean, that's the single most important thing, I would think, is that experience where they're like, oh my God, this is fantastic. I'm so happy I did this. So what have you guys been doing to implement that?
Yeah, so I mean, being back to a live experience has been a slow drudge for us, right? Like, the tasting room at our winery was closed for a large portion of last year. We got back to having tastings, which I think in the beginning people were just happy about. But I think really, right, every interaction we're having with our customers just speaks to the brand that we have. And it's not just a matter of what happens when they walk in the door. It's also what happens when they comment on a social media post or send an email or place an online order. And so, for me, hospitality is really about, two things: heart and hustle. And I think that working hard is a part of it to make sure that we can deliver on, the experience that we've committed to. But the other part of it is really just being able to be as much high touch and really spending time focused on building relationships with our customers, much more in our industry than maybe some others are. And I think that, you think a lot of other industries, when they talk about being customer centric, they're trying to get towards really what is the heart of hospitality, which is those relationships with our customers. The wine is important. People have to actually like it. But I think where we really have focused on is, our winery is very much like a come as you are, drink what you like philosophy to wine. And I think that's a different conversation that we're having with our customers than a lot of traditional wine vineyards or wine companies have had. And I think that there's going to be much more of an opportunity over the next couple of years that we're going to see, some emerging micro urban, however you want to think of it, wineries come about, because it does give people a different experience than maybe the perception of the industry. So that's a roundabout way of saying, like, we're still working on our in-person experience in the winery, but we're putting a lot of touch in. I personally speak to as many of our customers as I can. We've had some people in the comments today of people that we've done virtual tastings for with a couple different groups, with the Travel Pack Club and Black Connect 757. And so, we really just have tried to give access and give opportunity to have people experience what we do, which is a little bit different.
Just a quick kind of other piece of that. So with COVID, with restrictions, without like masks, stuff like that, and then you wanting to be so high touch, like how do you still do that while having to be a little bit more cautious on that? I mean, do you just assume that, like, hey, if they're in here, like, we're going to go for it, or like, what do you do?
Yeah, I mean, there's been a transition, right? When we first took over, essentially it was like curbside pickup orders. Like, the only interaction we really had was on the phone or like in their window. And I'm like, hello, like, I'm like mask handing you, like bottles or boxes of wine. But I think those small moments matter. I think that those 30 seconds or that minute may be the difference in someone really feeling like they had a good interaction that day. At the time, like, that may have been the only time they left their house that day or that week. So
yeah, there was times where that's how people were. Yeah,
we couldn't take that for granted, right? Like, people are still choosing to spend that moment with us. They're still bringing us their business when they have a lot of options, right? And so I think that high touch and really pouring into those relationships it's non-negotiable in our business. I mean, it really is. Like, we can have all the e-commerce and digital tools and marketing spend that we want to have. At the end of the day, there are so many options, and we're such a tiny fish in a big pond.
Yeah, one question I have that we didn't get a chance to circle around to in terms of a smooth transition was from a distribution network. do wineries have their own distributors, or is it wine and beer? Because it seems like that's like a marriage within itself. From a craft beer standpoint, it's like once you sign with your distributor, you're done. You're like done, either good or bad. Is the same whole true from a winery standpoint?
Yeah, so we don't distribute. I mean, we self-sell, we sell direct, winery direct, and part of that is being able to fulfill the commitments that you make once you enter into a partnership like that. I was really fortunate to meet a couple of people in the brewery, distillery, hard cider, kind of facets of the business that we've been able to kind of lean on for some stories and some advice of them making transition. So we've made the decision that we haven't gone the distribution route yet. And I'm not sure
would that
that we will.
prevent you from them being in a restaurant, for example?
Right now it will. We can work with a third-party company that'll essentially do the paperwork to distribute, and then we can self-deliver. And so we could open up that, right? But I don't see for our business in the near future that we would establish a full distribution partnership, because number one, we don't produce at the level that we would need to right, refulfill orders. We'd have to start with a small footprint. And at that point, right, it's really a discussion about becoming a wine business or manufacturing company and less of a physical space, right? Which isn't necessarily wrong, but it's just we haven't made the decision, about the long tail of the business where we're going there yet.
Is it because distribution you give exclusive rights to?
Well, I mean, there's a couple of things. Number one, once we get into stores and things, if people start buying the product, we don't want it to run out, right? And so being able to fulfill the reorder, like we're
good
not
problem to have, I guess.
Out beer every week, right? And I've talked to a couple of cider companies that essentially have gotten to the point where they've been forced to just continually produce for those customers. It's a lower profit point, right? And so we're also handing over for the sake of volume, profitability, and so it has to balance the right way. It has to make sense that we come out net positive in that decision, because it's not about, for us, it's not about growth for growth's sake, right? We're not a startup in an accelerated, growth plan. We're kind of on a slow and steady, much more small business, deliberate growth plan. And I think that we'll have the option we'll come to a few forks in the road over the next couple of years that we can make those decisions at that time.
I appreciate that you said that. Right? Because so many people will get into a business like yours and think that they can become the next whatever big thing, right? And they like try to be that, and it's like you're missing the point. Like you have to know who you are, and like you are not like, not to say that you couldn't, but in your current facility, you've admitted it, right? Like you can't do it, right? So if you change, if you pivot into this other thing where you're a manufacturing company, that's a completely different story. But for that facility, for that location, you know what you can do, and you're trying to do it, to the best of your damn abilities. And I appreciate that you say that and are honest about it, because so many people just don't get that, and they end up losing because of it, because they think that they can be this big thing, and it's like you don't have the capabilities to even do something like that. So it's good that you recognize that.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a couple of different ways to look at it long tail, right? Like I think that that's exactly what we're doing. We're deliberately growing in a structured way while increasing our efficiencies to be able to grow our audience. But right, especially in the beverage business, when you get to any kind of like distribution scale, like what you're really doing at that point is it'd be much more beneficial to just like position yourself for an acquisition at that point, right? Because what ends up happening is you cross over a certain line as a small to growing, beverage business, whether it's beer, spirits or wine, and you end up becoming a target for larger companies, right? Which is great if that's your end game. For me, that's not our end game, and that's not our business goal, right? Like our business goal for this is that we have like a small business that we really actually enjoy running, that we've got a small intimate team, and that we have real roots to the community.
And your customers will really appreciate that, because they'll be able to tell it. At the end of the day, you won't lose that aspect of it.
And to add on to that, I mean, so what I'm hearing you saying is that you have a great lifestyle business, and there seems to be such a negative connotation with lifestyle businesses, and you can have a really, really profitable lifestyle business, and that's great. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. So congratulations to you.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of early mornings and late nights. I'll admit that. I'm not all in on like hustle culture and like
no one should be
bragging about how I've had those long days. But I think that to your point about kind of just the lifestyle, I think that there are ways that you can either acquire or manufacture that part of your life in a way that works. And it's not a perfect process and it takes time, but we're working towards that. And I'm excited for kind of where it goes.
Is there anything we haven't talked about today that you want to?
I would say not really. I think we've had a good chat, based on my expert judgment here.
One last question I have for you. You mentioned, so we have your website listed for those that are watching. Is that the place to go if businesses want to get in on the corporate gifts side of the house? I mean, one thing that just really irritates me is when you go to these, now that networking events are starting to open back up, and then you get, big labeled names as opposed to going to someone like you and purchasing local and showcasing what we have local. So is that the place for people to go for gift baskets, gifting, customer appreciation type things?
Yep, that is the place to go. We have a contact form on the website for corporate ordering, be able to put in your information, also for private events, and then to just purchase tickets. All of our at the winery, we're doing ticketed events. We're not doing open bar hours where people can come kind of whenever they like, and that helps us really kind of craft the experience for people in a group setting.
Awesome.
It's like appointment based.
So we'll do like a set time. We'll do set times for tastings, and
cool.
we'll book up the tables, and then at that point, everybody's getting kind of to share in the experience. I guess I should have touched on that earlier when we were talking about it.
No, but that's smart, right? Like, because I remember when everything really started with COVID, everything was appointment based, and I was like, I really like this. I know when I can go to the pool. I know when I can get a haircut. I guess in theory, I know when I can go to the grocery store. If you're doing carry out that way, like. It is kind of nice to just show up and be catered to, and that's what we want, right? So, Brandon, it's been a blast. Appreciate it. Thanks for watching, everyone. Tim, anything else?
No, appreciate your time, Brandon. Great talk.
Thanks, guys.
See y'all soon. Peace and wine.